I think it's starting. Perfect. There we are. So welcome to I guess this is the third interview for our Forza Athletics podcast, and I'm really happy that I get the chance to talk to Mel Herl. Just graduated, I guess, a couple years ago, right? From
like 2 years from Shattering.
Shattering. Okay, so I'm glad you said that because I've been trying to figure out how to pronounce the college that I can't.
There's a million different ways to skin that cat, I tell you what.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in throwing?
So actually, I didn't start throwing until like towards the end of my junior year of high school. I was throwing feed at a feed store, and my high school coach, came in to get feed for a horse, and I just threw a couple bags over my shoulder, walked out, put them in a pickup, and her and her husband are kind of looking at each other, and they kept like coming in throughout the day, and I was like, how much feed do these people need, And then finally, her husband kind of got up the nerve to say something to me, and then I wasn't really too interested. I ran cross country, I played soccer. I wasn't really athletic, I guess you could say. Sure. I was just a country kid. I was used to working, lifting stuff. I didn't think about putting numbers behind it or anything, and then I just kind of started with a track team, kind of testing the waters, and then about then in my first year, I won a state championship, and then kind of fell in love with it. And, I threw like 38.6, I think, my freshman year or my junior year as a shot putter, and it was like 115 in disc or something like that. And then I ended high school with 145 and almost 43. So from there, I kind of went to Shadron. Started at Shadron under an awesome throws coach named Jess Horsley. She's at CSU Pueblo now. So I was with her for a few years, and then we had kind of a coaching staff change up. Our head coach went to be the assistant coach at CSU, Colorado State. So kind of a lot of coaching changes there. And then my true senior year, I decided to redshirt. My junior year, I kind of finally started to figure stuff out. My sophomore year, I actually dropped out of college for a semester. So went the whole first semester without any training, came back, still qualified for nationals. And that kind of lit a fire under me. Came back under a new coach who was very, very well versed in the weight room. I think that was kind of a missing piece. I mean, Shadron just at the time had a really janky weight room. We lifted on the second floor, and only 3 people could really lift heavy because we only had 2 platforms and barely any bumper plates. And so like football had to go in like 7 groups. I don't even know how that college managed so long with a weight room like that. But luckily we've got a phenomenal facility, which I later on had the opportunity to work in. So that kind of lit the fire under me, got my lifts up, got my technique down a little bit more. I went through puberty really late. I was just a really long human. And so I didn't know what the heck my body was doing. So by the time I was about 22, I figured it out. And that's when I kind of decided that I needed to take that redshirt year. And it kind of worked because I finished with my undergraduate in 2015. And so it just kind of made sense to stretch out for 2 years to help pay for my master's. So it kind of worked. My coaches agreed that it worked. By the end of that redshirt year, that was my first time going to USA's in the weight throw. I hit 50 feet in the shot put. And then walking into my senior year, I was ready for it. I was ready to go in and just make a name for myself. And it was kind of a crazy year. I got in a really bad car wreck right before the year started, totaled my car, and was kind of benched for about 6 weeks. And then I got back in it, and just, my strength staff and everybody around me really helped kind of propel me into my senior year, which obviously turned out, it's the highlight of my whole career. So it was awesome. So that was kind of the synopsis there.
So that's a huge synopsis. So if you don't mind, I kind of want to take it back. So you played soccer and ran cross country in high school.
Yeah.
You were 40-foot shot putter, 140-foot discus thrower. So when did you realize, hey, maybe I kind of have a knack for this. Maybe I should try and throw at the college level. Like, were you like, because you went to school in Colorado, right? You're from Colorado?
Yep, I'm from Eaton.
Okay,
yep.
So when did you realize, or when did somebody first contact you and like, hey, by the way, 140 feet's really good. Maybe you want to try in college?
That's actually a really funny story. So I wasn't really going to go to college. I was just going to go the military route, from a military family. But my high school coach was really kind of pushing me to keep throwing. She thought that I had something there, and she's actually phenomenal. I actually currently live with them. So they obviously are very big influences in my life. So I sent my questionnaire into Shadron, and they actually deleted it because they were like, no, we don't need this person, whatever. And but my high school coach actually went to Shadron State. And so she called up the head coach and was like, hey, why aren't you recruiting her? I don't understand what's going on here. And he was like, oh, her marks, like, they're okay. At this point, like, this is my senior year before I hit my bigger numbers. And it's like, yeah, she's okay. He's like, but we just don't have money for like a subpar shot putter and discus thrower, And Mandy was like, no, I think this girl you need to give a look at. And then going into my senior year, that was in high school, they definitely took a lot of more looks at me that year. They were at my state meet, they kind of upped my scholarship here and there so I could make it feasible to go up there. And I just decided Chadron's really affordable. It's a small town, which I'm used to. Obviously, Eaton's an incredibly tiny little town, or was at the time. It just kind of made sense. I was like, whatever, it's a free education, may as well pursue it. So I was like, what do I have to lose? I mean, I'm not going to lose any money. I may as well just kind of pursue it. And I went there, and that's when my head coach, Ryan Bailey, my throws coach, Jess Horsley, and the whole staff really was just so behind me in this. Every time I was down, they were constantly behind me, reminding me of the process. And I just developed these really intense and lifelong relationships with these people that I'm very grateful for. But they were definitely the first three that really kind of put me on that course and kept pushing me. So
what was that? So what was the transition from high school to college like? So if you're like, did you have like a big graduating class in high school, and then all of a sudden you step foot on campus, you're like, whoa, like this is kind of not what I expected? Or like, how was that transition in the, your first semester of school?
I can tell you that I graduated in 3 years because my first semester, I wasn't very smart. I just kind of, I didn't have any rules. I was like on my own, and I just kind of I wasn't doing anything crazy. And I got like a 3.2 that semester. And I was like, okay, I'm not saying this is bad, but this is not like quality of work that I know I'm capable of. And that just kind of was like the turning point for me. I was like, okay, I gotta get serious. And I was doing the right things in track, but I wasn't staying focused. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't recovering well. I had some issues with insomnia, and that kind of overflowed. So I met with my advisor. He helped me kind of switch over to partially online so that I wasn't having super early morning classes, so that I could kind of get my insomnia under control. And then luckily, Chadron is small enough where I had the same 3 or 4 teachers do the entire duration of my all my degrees. So that was really handy. And they just kind of put me on the right path and kind of pushed me forward in that respect. So that first semester, definitely, I learned a lot about myself. Kind of moving forward, it was definitely a defining point in my career as an athlete and an academic student. So
then you fast forward to your senior year. So you literally like blow up Division II, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your indoor season? I don't want to, you could talk a little bit more about it. So
that was a crazy year. I think, it was exciting because I kind of came back in that fall where we're training our buns off, and, I'm training 3, 4, 5 hours a day. I'm getting drills in on my own. I was the assistant strength and conditioning coach. So I ate, slept, breathed Chadron State. I was constantly, I was on campus at 5 a.m. and 5:15 every morning. I didn't leave until 7 or 8 at night, and then I'd go to my other job. It's just like I was all over the place. But yeah, we kind of going into it kind of knew, like the first day of weight practice, we were like, okay, like this could be something. And I was more explosive over the summer. I had lost about 30 pounds and I had put, 40, 50 pounds on my squat. I put, 30, 40 pounds on my bench. Like everything was just going up. My body mass went down. I got explosive. I got athletic. Again, I kind of started to really feel what my body was doing. I was way more aware of what things were doing and why they were doing them. And it was kind of the point where I'd walk out of the ring and I just point at something and my coach would just nod. There was very little communication verbally. We just kind of had that understanding of what was going on. So then we had our inner squad, and I think I threw like I got high 20, and that's when we kind of knew, we're like, okay, this could be good. And then I opened at a 21:36, and then the following week we maxed, and then I got insanely sick. They put me in my own hotel room and everything because I was coughing so hard. And then when I threw my 21:89, which led all divisions for about 6 weeks. When I threw that one, I actually threw in a flight by myself because the facilities couldn't hold me. So they had like their batting cages up by the ceiling, and I was throwing at such an arch that it would land in the net, and it like ripped it down. Like it ripped part of the ceiling. So the next morning I get a call at like midnight. They're like, hey, do you want to throw at like 8 a.m. tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, obviously. So I get to track it like, 6:30, just all juiced. And they had lowered the nets, and I had to throw over them and dodge the cables. So we kind of put me in the ring a little bit so that I wouldn't hit those cables. And it was an experience. You were trying to time it too, because we're kind of just going with the 5-1 with the facility restrictions, and it was crazy, but it was cool because everybody was kind of getting there, and so the energy was kind of getting hyped up by the time I was like really in it, and so that was interesting, and that was just kind of like the defining point. Then we kind of broke things down, and we trained through conference. We borderline trained through nationals because we knew hammer was kind of where we wanted it, and that's when we kind of started breaking things down and kind of train hammer a lot more. I just dropped down to a chain, literally a 9-pound chain with no ball on the end so I could feel it, which obviously is very different than the weight because your counter is so off. So we kind of sacrificed a little bit of the potential I think we could have had in the weight just so that we could kind of pursue the hammer a little bit harder, because I opened a week after my indoor nationals. I opened 5 days later for outdoor in all 3 of my events. So it was just kind of, we kind of knew we wanted it outdoor. We knew indoor might have been all right. And that was a crazy year. It was just from one meet to the next. I maxed out my meets. By the time I got to last chance meets for outdoor, I had to sit a couple out because I was going to meets left and right, just trying to get everything I could in. I was constantly trying to just, track down competition, chase them, work on my mental game. I read the book Mind Gym, which was a huge game changer. I actually read that on the plane from Denver to Birmingham, and that completely changed my mindset walking into that meet. And losing the weight throw, well, I'll say losing, I got 3rd place. I went in ranked 2nd, came out 3rd. I think that was the fire I needed to kind of push me forward in the shot put. I was ranked 6th in the shot. Nobody was really, I kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. I had changed from a rotation to a glide like 3.5 weeks prior because the rotation was so off. We couldn't figure it out. And nothing is more disheartening when your coach looks at you and says, I don't know how to fix you. You're just like, great. Like, we're both now just like chickens with their heads cut off. What do we do? And so I was at a meet, and I kind of overheard a coach saying, she just needs to go to a glide. And I'm like, okay. So 6th throw, I go out there and hit a glide, and it was further than anything I'd hit that season. And so that was a very frustrating season. Then we kind of figured it out as we got towards the end of outdoor. I was hitting that 1692 towards the end of outdoor. So I do kind of wonder where I would have been if I'd been able to kind of stick with one or the other, but I bobbled back and forth so much through college and it wasn't really my love. It wasn't my passion. Discus was definitely my passion. So again, we just kind of had to sacrifice in some areas so that we could build in others. And that's just the name of the game in Division II, because they want to capitalize on you wherever they can. So walking into a conference meet, trying to win 30 points. I mean, that was a lot of times I was a third of the conference points, but that was enough to put our name on the board. So
So you mentioned like making sacrifices. So is that like a conversation you sit down with your coach and you're like, okay, like we're going to throw all 3 events today. We'll see what happens. We'll let it ride. Or how does that conversation happen? Like from your perspective, because you're a high level athlete. I mean, I think you threw 50 feet in the shot put, 50 meters in the discus, well over 50 in the hammer. I mean, that's like an elite, you're in a group by yourself. So like when you sit down and you're like, okay, maybe we won't focus on the shot this week. We'll just focus on the discus, or we'll put the hammer on the back burner and focus on shot. Like, how does that conversation happen with your coach?
I think it was kind of an unspoken thing that happened pretty often. We just kind of, whatever was looking best that week, we just kind of aimed for that. And we really just shot for consistency. When I came out of weight throw with the 21, my only goal was to just go through the season with 21s. And I hit 21s at every single meet other than USA's. But again, we were just training through that. I just maxed that week before, training for nationals. Really was just trying to get a look at the competition, just kind of mentally prepare for nationals. So that was my goal there. Shot put, I really was just happy to get on the board. It was, I guess it's not really my true love. I really struggled with it. I had a pretty significant hand injury my junior year. Couldn't touch a shot put for 5-6 months after that. So it wasn't really something that brought me a lot of joy. But that was one thing where if I was over 15, I felt pretty good about. Discus, once I hit my 57 in discus, we really just kind of wanted to stick around 54 to 56. And training wise, that's where it kind of stuck. But that's a hard one too, because you have so many different variables going into meets with wind and travel and all that stuff. And then hammer, we really just wanted to stay over 60. I hit my 65 at nationals, luckily. So obviously we built up to it properly. But yeah, just kind of staying over 60 was the goal. So once I hit that 60 mark, we just wanted to maintain that as long as we could, just kind of keep it in that range, because we knew that really a 63, 64 was going to be competitive for that national championship at nationals. So that was the goal.
So tell us a little bit more about your accolades in college. So an All-American, like stuff like that. So for the people who don't know, or don't nerd out on the throwing and the things like that. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my first All-American was in the discus my junior year. That was back in 2015. Then I got 5 All-Americans in the throws my senior year, then an academic All-American. And that was my main goal. I really just wanted to hit an automatic qualifying mark in all my events, and I did that. And then I won 2 national championships, one in the indoor shot put and one in the outdoor hammer throw. So
you won. When did you win your outdoor hammer throw? Your senior year?
Mm-hmm. Yep, in 2017.
Bradenton. So talk a little bit about that. So you throw big mark. Did it qualified for U.S. Outdoor Nationals as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to USA's for the discus and the hammer throw. And that was kind of a tough meet. Training wise, I didn't really have a coach part of my outdoor season. And then after nationals, I didn't have a coach at all. So I kind of was just kind of reaching out. I was very fortunate to have coaches that were just helping me out as much as they could. And being a student of the sport, I was very eager for the opportunity to be able to train myself. Being in the weight room as the assistant strength coach, myself and my head coach, EJ Crease, took over my strength programming. So that was really cool to be able to kind of see how what we were doing is correlating to my throwing and back and forth. And we were able to get really in depth with it. But yeah, like walking into Outdoor USA's, I felt very underprepared. I wasn't nervous about the level of competition. I was pretty excited. I felt like I deserved to be there. I'd worked my butt off all year to get to that point. But, then the day we're leaving, we're driving 5 hours to Denver. We're sitting on the tarmac for 3 hours. Then we're flying. And then we were driving 2 hours to Sacramento. So we get into our hotel room at 5 a.m. and I have to compete that next night. And so it was just kind of crazy. And that first day just kind of set me back a little. And then I decided to do a little bit of a technique change up in between outdoor nationals and USA's. And that was a significant mistake, but I'm glad I went for it because I walked away from that meet. I walked away from Hammer a little frustrated, but also very optimistic about where it was kind of headed. I continued to train. I went out to Fresno State after that and continued to train with April Smith, and we just couldn't decide really where we wanted to drop an event. We didn't know what to do. We didn't really specialize me in anything. And so that was kind of another training mistake we made after that. But after kind of that senior year, it was hard to really hone in on one that I felt I had more talent in. And the hammer, I 2-turned in the hammer, which I could 3-turn, but it wouldn't go as far as a 2-turn, which made zero sense to me. But that was kind of one thing where we have the most capability in the hammer, the most room for growth there. But then discus, we're throwing 57 meters, we're 5 meters under, hitting a standard for the Olympics, that will come with time. And so we just were kind of what do we do? Do we train through it? My training age was so low that we felt that either way we went, it was just kind of a mess. But walking into USA's, I definitely felt like I could have done that a little better, but it put a lot of things into perspective as well.
So for somebody who's a 2-time national champion at the D2 level, you graduate, and then so how do you decide if I'm going to continue throwing, because you graduated in 17, right? Mm-hmm. So 17, so it's 19 now, so it's been 2 years, right? Yeah. The trials are next year, so was there somebody else? Because I know you talked about going to Fresno, but was there somebody else that was like, hey, maybe try it for another 3 years, the trials are coming up, let's see what happens, you're still really young, right? I think you just turned
25. I just turned 25.
I don't know if I should share how old you are, right? So you just turned 25, so you've been throwing less than 8 years.
Yeah.
Total, and you're 57 in the discus, a few meters under the standard for the Olympics.
Yeah.
So was there anybody that kind of encouraged you, or was it just I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna try? What brought you to Fresno?
So April Smith, she actually coached my high school coach for a short period of time. And she's from an area just outside of Chadron. So I kind of had ties with her, and that was really the one opportunity that presented itself to me. It kind of made sense to go out there. A few things kind of presented itself. I was talking to a few different people, was trying to get down to Chula Vista. And then things kind of, the coaching change up, there's kind of some political things at the training center, just kind of things got jumbled up. And so I ended up staying in Fresno. And then But I did have quite a few other people that were really on my side. You know, anytime that I needed to train somewhere, I could just call a coach and like, hey, I'm driving through, I'm coming here. They're like, yeah, absolutely, show up. You know, whatever. You know, Casey Malone at Colorado University of Colorado has been a huge mentor to me. You know, Judd Logan was always really supportive of me. He was probably more hyped in the hammer throw than I was, which was pretty cool to see when you have, you know, Judd Logan getting pumped for you to throw. That was very humbling. You know, so Judd was always very supportive. You know, anytime I would see him at a meet after that, he'd always ask me about my training and, you know, me as a person. And, you know, and then I have, you know, Brian Bedard at CSU, Colorado State, and he's an awesome guy. I love kind of just getting chummy with him. Just, you know, very curious about what I'm doing, making sure that I'm, you know, pursuing my talents and stuff like that. So I definitely had a lot of people that were in my corner and kind of pushing me, but it's just, I mean, anybody that's tried to be a post-collegiate athlete in a throwing sport, they know how hard it can be, and just financially it wasn't working for me in California. I was just kind of, I was having a hard time. I couldn't manage to keep a job and train as much as I wanted. I just couldn't seem to find the right balance and also, you know, be a volunteer assistant for the team. It just kind of got overwhelming. So then I ended up moving home and just kind of trying to pursue it from there. And just kind of waiting for things to fall into place at that point, just kind of keep grinding out. And one thing Casey Malone always told me is, he's like, it'd be a real shame if you stop. He's like, I didn't feel my best throws in my life until I was in my 30s. And so that really resonated with me. He's like, Mel, discus is a long-term game. He's like, you're going to have these, you know, 60, 65 meter discus throwers that, you know, are really great at that point, but they'll dip down, but they'll come back up. But a lot of them don't wait for themselves to come back up and give themselves time. And that's one thing I think Rachel Dinkoff does a really good thing of acknowledging, is that dip will come, but that means you're working on bigger things and you're getting back to that point where you want to be at to hit those big ones. So yeah, I mean, those are definitely some mentors in my life that were always in my corner.
So anybody who's thinking about, I mean, you kind of went into some really good detail about that. So anybody who's graduating like this year, the trials are next year, right? So it's like 18 months out. Mm-hmm. So what advice would you have for somebody that's, similar, 55 meter discus thrower for female, let's say maybe like 60 meter thrower for a guy, 65 meter hammer thrower that's like, I'm on the cusp, like maybe I should keep training for a year, see what happens, or maybe I should just like call it. Like, what would you tell them?
You know, I think I learned more about myself as an athlete in the time that I was in Fresno than I would say my entire 5 years at Chadron State. There were things that were clicking, cues that were being said that were, my other coaches were using that just didn't make sense at the time. And April did say a few, especially in discus. April really tuned me up in the discus and said a few things that just absolutely took my discus to the next level and made it more powerful. It made it just, everything was working cohesively for a change. And I wasn't just muscling it, because it's unfortunate when you're really strong and your technique is kind of on the lower end, because then that strength kind of overtakes it and you don't get to bump that technique as much as you would like to up. And I think that year, that especially at first year post-collegiately, that really forces you, because you're not in the weight room as much. You can't focus on being strong as much. You really have to hone in on, okay, I have half an hour and I have my throwing shoes. I can't get to the rings, but I can do drills for 30 minutes, that kind of stuff. I think that was a really big game changer for me. I mean, even now I just do drills in my garage, things that I want to try out on my current athletes and stuff like that. And I think that becoming just that next level of a student of your sport and kind of realizing what it's like when you don't have those resources that are right there day in and day out, that will teach you a lot about yourself and let you find out if you actually do want to throw. And I've known several people that have kind of taken a step back from throwing. I had to take a step back a little bit when I got back from Fresno before you kind of have to take a step forward. I know that it's hard. I mean, you're lifting at, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. You're throwing at weird hours. I mean, for a while I had a storage unit and I put a net up in the corner and I was in there, throwing in a storage unit. That's one of probably my favorite stories about being a post-collegiate thrower is I'd be like going to a storage unit to throw. My friends are like, hey, let's go hang out. I'm like, I got to go to the storage unit. Like, that makes no sense. But I think that one mistake that I made was not really securing financially myself. You don't need a lot. You just need to be able to get by. So I think finding a circumstance where you can make money, you can pay your bills, you're not worried about that. There's that flexibility there where if you need to walk away and go train somewhere else, you need to take a weekend off to go throw, that flexibility is there. I think that's a huge part of it, because when you don't have that financial stress, a lot of other things will take care of themselves. And just finding a coach, reaching out to coach. I don't know any coach that you couldn't contact and be like, hey, I'm working on this, this is what I'm working with. And they're going to take 5 minutes and shoot you a message or give you a call, and just utilizing those resources. And finding a coach can be hard, especially in certain areas. A lot of coaches are busy, especially if you're not that high-end athlete coming out, you're not a Valerie Allman or a Brooke Anderson, it's hard because you're just like kind of under that level, under that threshold there, and but I think just the try and the learning process is substantial to creating yourself as a human and as a thrower. Because I'm in the long term, I'm not going to be throwing in 10 years, but I will definitely be coaching. So the things I'm learning now, I will definitely be able to take into that 10 years. So I just kind of take it as an investment right now into my future coaching career, if that kind of makes sense.
No, it does make sense. So you're coaching now?
Mm-hmm. I coach at the high school level. I'm the director of sports performance at Pursuit Nutrition and Training in Windsor, Colorado. So I work with a lot of high school level athletes, and then I do coaching on the side. So I work a lot in the weight room, but it was just fun because I can kind of mix the weight room side, because I do feel like that's one thing. If I could have gotten involved with that a little bit sooner, who knows kind of where I'd been. I was big reason I got into strength and conditioning, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I dove into it, and then that obviously turned into my career. So that's a pretty cool thing to come about from that. But working with high schoolers is fun because it kind of it teaches you to simplify things. It definitely is a challenge. They have a very, very short attention span, but it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging. It really forces you to fall back on technique and fall back on corrections and get creative. And I mean, there's just crazy thing. I mean, my coach used to stand in front of me during shot put. I don't know why she did that. I don't know how she didn't lose all her teeth, but you just got to get creative. At some point, you're like, all right, you're throwing flat. How am I going to convince you to throw flat? Just not throw flat. Oh, I'm going to stand in front of you. Like, you just have to get really creative with that stuff, but it's fun too.
So your high school kids, do they like your success as a thrower at the collegiate and post-collegiate level? Is there a little bit of street cred where they're like, okay, coach is kind of like thrown far, so I should kind of listen to her? Or is it like, like, do they
give a crap half the time, honestly? But they are scared of me, which, I mean, my dad was a ranger, so growing up it was very, very strict. And just coming from a collegiate strength background, I don't take a lot of flack because I worked with football, so got to keep them in line. It was like herding chickens half the time. But no, I think that just them seeing me out there doing the turns and being interactive, and them just seeing my passion for it, I think that's the part that they take to the most, because they know that I'm not just out there for fun. I'm not just out there for the sunshine. As much as I love throwing in the 10-degree weather in Colorado in the winter, I think that they can see that throwing is something that I get very analytical about, something that really fires me up, and they take away from that. And I do care about them as people, and I know that throwing can not only develop them physically but mentally too. And it's that place where whatever's going on in their lives, they can just come there for an hour and just have somebody that cares about them and their success, and whatever that may be, whether it's a 28-foot shot putter going to a 29-foot. I mean, just as pumped about that as my 45-foot shot putter going to 46. I mean that, and I think that some of these kids put so much pressure on themselves to be that high level athlete and just be there, and they don't understand that process is there. But I was there, especially coming into track and field as late as I did. I didn't really feel that pressure. I didn't feel that burnout that all my other athletes in high school felt. They were all ready to be done with athletics, and I was just getting started. So I think that kind of nurturing that and making sure that those athletes maintain that passion moving on, I think that's important to me. So I think that they can see that and thrive off of that.
So you started coaching this fall, like with the high school kids, or is that so?
Yep.
So what's something that today that you're like, man, I wish I would have known this in September, or like known before I started working with high school kids, that like anything, any like particular like aha moment? Like I know you mentioned like you got to break things down and make it a little bit, simpler for them. Mm-hmm. Anything that's happened that's like, man, like I wish I would have done this in September as opposed to, doing that.
Yeah, with high school kids, just developing that base is the hardest part. I think that a lot of people overthink, like, well, I want to get them strong. I want to get them this. It's like, well, when you're in season, it's too late. You can't get them strong. But you also in September, you can't really get a lot of time with those kids. And so one thing I definitely found, especially when it comes to core workouts, is even me watering a core workout down, it's still too much for them. And that was something I definitely learned the hard way. I have kids that could hardly come to practice and get warmed up because they were so sore. I'm like, well, I don't understand. Like, this was like an eighth of what I would do in college, but then you just don't realize like how much you're using your core when you're working out 4 to 5 hours a day. So that was definitely something that I kind of had to check myself on a little bit there. And another thing with those guys is they don't do it unless you're watching them. And I had the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to get them this warm up, and then while they're warming up, I'm going to get these drills and these implements set up. But I look over and they've got their their sweaters over their head and they're being turtles, and I'm like, what is happening right now? So it's just, I definitely had to develop a little bit more of a sense of what I was doing, how I was doing it, breaking it down as much as possible, as little as they had to think of a better kind of thing. Because if you do get too technical too soon, they get gun shy. They don't like it. They don't like that you're throwing these terms at them, and they don't like that. And so that's a big thing I really had to check myself on, is just how can I make this fun but simple, and make it something that's applicable to them, that they understand, but it's also going to transfer if they continue on. They're going to be like, oh yeah, Coach Mel told me this 4 years ago, and this makes sense now, kind of in the same sense as when I went to Fresno. It's like, okay, now that makes sense. So working on that build and teaching them about this work. Especially in the weight room, I'm very big on, I'm not going to just give you a workout. I want you to know why you're doing it, how you're doing it, what kind of aggressiveness you're using towards it, how it's applying to your sport. As if I could put 5 pounds on the bar, but you pop a vertebra out, obviously I just wrecked you as an athlete and I've failed at my job. It's the same thing. It's like, okay, I can make you throw further, but now you hate the sport and you don't want to show up to practice. That's a big thing I have to check myself on a lot. I think every coach has to kind of do that sometimes. So,
well, I have the same thing with as coach at the Division III level. So here is the first year I've had all five freshman athletes, throwers, and they're all starting from scratch. So in New York State, we just started throwing the weight like 4 years ago. Yeah. For the kids that had a coach, it's like, oh my gosh, like they throw like Highland game style weight. So you're kind of starting over from scratch again. And then I have kids from PA that have never, they don't know what a weight is and stuff. So definitely, like, I could see that even at the college level. But I mean, they're all 18, 19 years old. So their throwing age is still relatively young. But so out of curiosity, so 2020, like 18 months away, let's say. So when was the last time you threw?
Like 500 days or something I saw the other day. It's getting close.
Just out of curiosity, you don't have to go into too much detail, but when was the last time you took a throw of anything? Like, seriously?
Well, right now we're doing, it's literally, they labeled it Snowpocalypse, so there's like an insane amount of snow on the ground. No, I got back into it. Rachel Denkoff definitely has been pushing me to get back into it full time. In January, I definitely kind of started pursuing it a little bit more. I took a small hiatus. USA Weightlifting picked me up as in their athlete transition program. So I took about 6 months to that was kind of like my little break I was talking there. I kind of worked with them, worked with an incredible coach named Matt Cooper. And yeah, so strength-wise, I got a lot stronger in ways that I didn't know that I could. I started catching my cleans in the bottom, and a lot of overhead movements. I got a lot stronger. I got more technical. And then, I had taken 8 months off of any kind of hammer turn, and then I went to a meet in December just for fun. My friend out at University of Colorado Springs, they have a brand new facility. He's like, oh, just come throw, whatever, I was like, okay, threw a 2089, and I was like, after 8 months off, okay, obviously my strength is still there, and that kind of clicked the wheels a little bit for me to turn in. So I kind of decided to get back onto discus at that point. So we'll kind of see. Definitely, Casey Maloney said just it's a long man's game, so just got to focus on that long term and go from there. And 2020 would be awesome. I think that if I could aim to get to the trials, that would be the first step. Just get that experience under my belt. But I think 2024 is kind of going to be more more my style, more my jam. So that's kind of what I'm working for right now. Just kind of work on the technique and the build and enjoy the process and just fall in love with my sport again. Kind of, just had a kind of a turbulent, crazy senior year. Had some differences with my coaching staff, and that just kind of ruined the sport a little bit for me. So I was just kind of trying to get through it at that point, and that made it hard going into post-collegiate because I was kind of confused as to why I was still throwing. I loved it, obviously, and I was good at it, but I lost that waking up every morning like, I want to go train, I need to go train, I have to go train. And so now I'm kind of getting back to that, and I think that's a crucial step in, especially if you're going to go post-collegiate. If you don't have that want, that fire, then it's why are you even doing it, kind of thing. So
tell me a little bit about that quickly. I don't want to keep you too long here, but so you were in the USA weightlifting, like the transition program. So do you want to go into like a little bit of detail, like about like what was that all like about?
Yeah, so it was like the weirdest thing. It was actually right after I decided to kind of put a pause on throwing. It was last June, end of June. They got a hold of me. They're like, "Hey, we want to put you through a trial. You hit these marks. We'd be really excited to see what you could do with a few months of training." So I went through a week-long trial period for that. Did some testing, kind of blew my marks out of the water that I needed to attain. And, I hadn't done a legitimate snatch in quite a while. And so it was just kind of a crazy process going into that. And then in July, they were like, all right, well, you meet all our standards. So we're going to pay for your training. We're going to send you some shoes, a sweet belt. We're going to support you any way we can. So I trained with Matt for a few months, and then I opened up and I missed the American Open by 2 kilos. And I was so frustrated because it's 2 kilos. It's not even 5 pounds. And watching the video on the lift that would have got me there, it was just like so slight. And it was just one of those things where we went up right up to the wire. We had like a week and a half to register for the Open. And we were like, what do we do? Do we try to go again next weekend? And so that was an interesting process, but I was also like, all right, this is my first time in the sport. And here I am barely missing nationals, something that people train all their lives for. And I think I'm ranked like 12th in the country in my weight class. And so that was kind of a hard part because I was like in between where, I was like, they changed the weight classes. Do I go down? Do I go, do I gain weight? I didn't want to do that. That was obviously going to hurt throwing if I ever got back into it. If I go down, how's that going to affect my strength levels? Because that's kind of a hit or miss thing. And so that was an interesting process. It was fun. It was great. Getting to work with a coach in a sport that I didn't know a ton about was super fun. It kind of just like revitalized my energy as an athlete and kind of made me focus up on a lot of things that I didn't realize I was being so sloppy with. And it also made me a better coach in the weight room because I now have a completely different toolbox that I didn't have before. So that was awesome. And now I have an amazing resource and an amazing friend, Matt. So that was a crazy process. I made a lot of friends along the way. A lot of people that were previous throwers that are now doing, Mackenzie Warrens was in the program as well. I know Christina McDonald was in the program for a little bit, and then she decided to continue throwing out in Boston. So, I just kind of made a lot of connections, and that in turn helped me with throwing wise as well. A strength wise, and B, like making all these connections and networking is just kind of opened my eyes on a lot of, new doors for me to a new realm, and, not only as a professional, but as an athlete. So
would you try in 2020 to hit the qualifier in Olympic weightlifting and throwing?
I don't know. I'm still training for OLY weightlifting, not as seriously as I used to, but definitely still kind of there. That's one of those things where it was destroying my body. My body was falling apart. And I think that I definitely could get there. It just at what cost to my body was kind of bad because it made throwing so hard. It made doing drills hard, and my central nervous system was just constantly shot. And so I think that would be a very delicate balance between, how do we train both? And I think that especially being, as, having a full-time job and running around with clients and, athletes and everything, I think that I just kind of needed to focus up, and I was just kind of trying to have my hand in too many pots. And at some point, and that was my big problem in college too, I was in all these different events, and, had I just specialized in one or two, like who knows what those could have been. But I mean, just kind of, that was another thing I kind of took away from Fresno too. So I think we'll see. Maybe I don't want to completely rule it out just yet because I do have a lot of fun with it, but we'll see. Whatever happens.
Well, on that note, then I appreciate your time. Thanks for taking the time out. I forgot all about the you're a couple hours behind, right? So you're in Colorado.
Yeah, it's like 7 or 8 here, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's only like 9:45 out here, so it's bedtime. But is there anything else you want to share? Anything like I didn't ask that you're like, wanting to get out, or maybe we'll save it for the next one.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk to me. Sorry, I kind of rambled there a lot.
Okay, no, it's cool.
It's kind of weird putting it all in perspective sometimes when you sit back and look at it. No, I think it's awesome. Just kind of, I was listening and watching a couple of the other two podcasts that you've done. It's kind of cool just to watch the stories and kind of the motivation, because you just never know when someone's going to watch that or hear just the right part of it that can be like, oh, it's this is what I'm clinging to. This is what I'm moving forward with. No, I think really the only thing I have to add to what we talked about is the one big game changer for myself, and one thing that I really push with my athletes is the sports psychology behind things. And I think that that's a huge game changer. I spoke with one of my good friends, Madison McLaughlin. She was the Division II outdoor shot put champion in 2016. Hell of an athlete. And just incredible athlete. I mean, she just moves so well. She's kind of something you look at and you're like, her, and then you see her move and you're like, well, that is just a raw athlete. And she sat down with me one time. This was when I was kind of having some issues with my coaching staff. She sat me down and she's like, Mel, you got to focus on your visualization. You got to focus on seeing the situation and imagining yourself responding positively to that and just moving forward with that. And she gave me all these books and all these exercises and things, and I took 10 minutes a day and just visualizing all these things and kind of putting things into perspective. She's like, Mel, I was never the athlete that trained hours and hours a day. I would show up, I had 6 other people at my practice, we'd train for an hour, I'd go to the weight room, maybe train for an hour. Okay, then I'd go home. I'd do, whatever. And she's like, and I won a national championship. She's like, but I can tell you the difference between the other athletes and myself is that my mind was there. She's like, I never walked into a meet thinking that I couldn't win. She's like, I didn't care if I was seeded 6th. I didn't walk in thinking, oh, I might win. I walked in, I'm going to win. And I think that was huge. I mentioned the book Mind Gym, and I literally order copies and copies and copies of that book because I'm just constantly handing it out to athletes. And I think it's critical. I love the idea of just harnessing your mind and putting it forward. I think Sean Donnelly has a lot of good insight into those things. Christina McDonald is really phenomenal with those things, just sitting down and self-evaluation. There's a time, especially in throwing when I was still out in Fresno, I just kind of felt sorry for myself. I was like, man, I felt almost a little entitled. I was like, man, I was a good college athlete. Like, I should have a coach. I should have a great training place, this and that, And that shot me in the foot faster than anything. And that was a huge wake up. And when I was messaging Sean at one point about something, and I was like, oh, well, thank you for helping me with my shit show today. And he goes, don't be dramatic. And I was like, I don't know what it was, but that clicked for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm just blowing everything out of the water. And that just kind of forced me to push myself back and be like, okay, focus up. Like, everybody has this same situation. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. What are you going to do with it, kind of thing? So I think that really taking a look at that, and as a coach as well. And I was very fortunate when I was getting my master's while I was the assistant strength coach at Shadron, because I looked at leadership and followership styles. And I got to look very wholeheartedly at the coach-athlete relationship and just how what I do as a coach affects my athlete, how those things are received, and how I respond and react to things. That's critical in their development and my development. And so in turn, as an athlete, knowing how it wasn't until I was coaching that I didn't realize how annoying it was when an athlete is walking away from you, even though I know I did it while I was still listening, like how frustrating that is as a coach when they're not stopping and giving you their attention. And I didn't even realize that until I was doing, on both ends of it. But that comes down to the relationship part of it and the psychology behind it. And I just think that's a huge and critical part if anybody's looking to up their game, just kind of harnessing that part of the game. I think it's going to be a huge game changer for him. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Well, that's great. No, you got me fired up now. I don't want to keep you for like another hour or whatever, because it's a bulk of my research is focused on coach-athlete relationships.
Yeah.
So our team that I work with out here in Rochester, we just submitted a research paper for publication that focused on that. So I could talk your ear off about that, but I don't want to this time. We'll save it for the next time on the coach-athlete relationships. But Mel, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out tonight.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. So
thanks. Take care.
You too.